October 3rd of 2016, DJ was murdered. There is a murderer walking the streets in Georgia who has gotten away with murder.
What's up guys, it's Griffin and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm covering another true crime case, but this video is going to be a little different. Today's case is about DJ Fickey, and I'm working with Joshua Miles on this case because it's absolutely massive.
Hi YouTube, it's Joshua Miles and welcome back to Griffin's channel. I am a British true crime YouTuber who makes 2 videos a week about true crime, and I am working with Griffin today to bring you this case.
This video is split into 2 different parts. Part 1 is on Josh's channel and part 2 is here on my channel. We had to split it up into 2 videos because of how big this case is and how many important details there are. Joshua and I have had the honor of working alongside Amanda, DJ's sister, in this case. We've actually been given unrestricted access to case files and information surrounding this case. I ask that you guys remain respectful in the comments because Amanda, throughout all this tragedy, has had the courage to open up and talk about her brother's murder in front of thousands of people. Before you start watching this video, I strongly advise that you go watch part 1 on Joshua's channel, otherwise this video probably won't make the most sense to you. You can find a link to part 1 in the description or in the iCards up above. And without further ado, let's get into the case. We left off in part 1 with the 911 calls that John, the person of interest, made moments after DJ's death, and the fact that the 911 dispatcher instructed John to unload and disarm the gun, which would automatically have additional fingerprints placed on the weapon, and give John a super easy alibi as to why his fingerprints in particular were on the weapon and the trigger. After John unloaded the weapon, he placed it on the shelf above DJ's head. The police then arrive on the scene and are met by John and Brandy in the driveway. Interestingly, John actually gives the shotgun shell to the first responding police officer. This means that the shotgun shell itself was contaminated evidence due to it being moved and touched after the fact, just like with the shotgun. And now John had a strong alibi and reasoning behind why his fingerprints were found on both the shotgun and the shotgun shell. The officer asks where the shotgun is and asks if anyone else is in the home. I believe that John tells the officer that the weapon is secured on a shelf above DJ's head and that there's nobody else in the home. Subsequently, the officer goes inside the home and secures the crime scene. The officer then informs EMT, who are the paramedics that arrive on the scene with the ambulance, to not go in the house and touch anything as it is an active crime scene. That in itself is very interesting to me, and you'll see why as we delve deeper into this case. At about the same time the first responding officer tells this to the EMT, the detective and the coroner arrive on the scene. The detectives and the coroner go straight into the trailer before any proper investigation has even started. They rule the death a suicide and they don't take statements from anyone aside from John. John tells detectives that DJ shot himself and he tried stopping him, spinning the same story that he told to the 911 dispatcher. From day 1, this case was painted as a suicide and treated as such. They had taken one statement from John, the person of interest, and apparently that's all the detectives needed to rule this case a suicide. They tried to talk to Brandy, but she was so hysterical from just witnessing the death of her husband and she couldn't say a word. And also, as it turns out, she was probably terrified because the detectives wouldn't take her aside to speak with her. She had John standing over her, which we will go into why that terrified her later. The detectives failed to speak with DJ's family, who had text message proof that he was fearful for his life. They failed to do any proper investigation on this case. They saw the trailer, which was quickly judged as a messy drug den by the investigators, and then they saw the victim and ruled this entire case a suicide. And due to this ruling, it opened up the crime scene, which meant that anybody could go into the house and people who were already there were allowed to stay, destroying any evidence that could later be used in court. Also, very interestingly, detectives noted that John was changing his story multiple times that same day. Every time they spoke to him, it seemed to be something a little different, and that still wasn't enough for them to investigate. To me, even when presented with such a traumatic event, the fact alone that the key witness you're using to rule and close the case is changing their story is very suspicious.
DJ's family then arrived on the scene. During the car journey on the way to Old Man's place, DJ's mum actually received a phone call from someone who she initially believed to be a detective, but it actually turned out to be a phone call from the coroner. Now, DJ's mum was quick to tell the coroner about all the text messages she had received from DJ and how DJ had said that he was afraid for his life. She went on to tell the coroner that DJ did not kill himself. Now, the coroner effectively ignored what DJ's mum had revealed to him and shut her down by saying that DJ had committed suicide due to a self-inflicted shotgun wound that he had sustained to his face. And there was a report from a witness who also claimed that DJ had shot himself. This witness, as it turns out, was John, the person of interest, the same person who had threatened DJ's life in the past. However, despite this, the coroner decided that they would send DJ for a autopsy. Now, when DJ's mum got to the scene of the crime, she demanded from the detectives that they take gunshot residue tests from everybody that was present. And the detectives turned around and said, "We've already done this. There's no need to do it again. We've already collected these tests." Obviously, these tests can be used to see if anybody has fired a weapon recently. It wasn't long after DJ's mum arrived on the crime scene that everybody just started to leave. The detectives started to leave. They started to get into their cars and drive away. And before they did that, John actually walked up to one of the detectives and asked whether he could clean up the scene. They hadn't sectioned off the crime scene, they had just left it open for anyone to walk through, and John was wanting to clean it up. And the detectives answered John by saying, "Sure, why not?" John then burnt the love seat that DJ had been sat on when he was shot, which is a vital piece of evidence. Like we said earlier, the crime scene was completely unsecured and anybody could just walk in and out. Could have been disturbed by anyone and could be tampered by anyone. Horrifically, the detectives even allowed DJ's mum to walk onto the crime scene and see all the blood that was all over the crime scene. Could see her own son's not even dry blood, a sight that no mother should ever see. Because the authorities had then left, everybody else decided that they would also leave. Brandy decided to jump into the back of DJ's mum's car, and in this car was DJ's mum and Amanda's husband. However, DJ's mum and Amanda's husband had no idea what had actually happened to DJ. They had no idea what was going on. They knew that DJ wouldn't have killed himself, so they didn't feel comfortable with Brandy being in the car. So subsequently, Brandy got out of the car and they drove away back home. I believe Brandy then stayed the night at Old Man's place, but I'm not sure whether she did or not, but I believe she did stay the night there. Interestingly, DJ's sister Amanda tried to make contact with the coroner when they got back home. However, this was to no avail. She was trying to figure out where exactly her brother's body had gone.
The next day, on the 4th of October of 2016, Brandy's aunt found out what happened and tried to make contact with Brandy, but her attempts were to no avail. So Brandy's aunt and Brandy's brother both decided to drive to Old Man's place and see if she was there. And she was, so they decided to take Brandy back to Brandy's aunt's house so that she could be with family and they could look after her. On the drive back to Brandy's aunt's house, Brandy broke down and told her aunt the true story of what actually happened to DJ Fickey. Upon hearing Brandy's story, which we'll go into in just a moment, Brandy's aunt decided to call DJ's mom immediately and tell her what Brandy had just said. They then decided that they would take Brandy to the detective's office so that she could give her full statement, but at this point in the day, it was after hours, so nobody was there. This just meant that they would have to go back the next morning, and they did just that. The next morning, on October 5th of 2016, Amanda's husband, and DJ's mom all picked up Brandy and took her to the detective's office. Amanda called ahead and let them know that they were on their way with Brandy and that she wanted to speak to them about the death of DJ Fickey. On the way to the detective's office, Brandy wrote down a list of people who were there when DJ was actually shot. And she told Amanda that they all took off right after it happened and showed back up later to avoid suspicion, as if they weren't ever there. This meant that there were multiple witnesses witnesses to the crime. When they got to the Walker County Sheriff's Office, Brandy spoke to detectives for a couple of hours and then went back home with DJ's family. This is Brandy's story. On October 3rd of 2016, Brandy and DJ woke up in John's camper, and John offered them methamphetamines, but they declined. Brandy and DJ then left the camper and went back over to the trailer to get something to drink and use the toilet. The trailer housed a few other people on Old Man's property. Old Man lived in the house, and there were a few people living in the trailer with John outside in his camper. Brandy went to go fix DJ a drink, and then she went to the bathroom to freshen up and fix her hair. DJ then came into the bathroom and spoke to Brandy about his mom. After this short conversation, DJ went back into the living room. Brandy finished up her hair before going back into the living room to join her husband. As she walked into the living room, a man who we will call Peter for the sake of this video followed her. When Brandy got to the living room, her eyes met with DJ, and in that exact moment, John walked out of the bedroom that was just beyond DJ, angrily and violently holding a gun. He aimed the gun at a downward angle at DJ on DJ's left side before yelling, "You goddamn motherfucker." John then shot DJ. As soon as the gun went off, Brandy fled for fear of her life. She ran out of the house screaming for help, hoping that someone would hear her and help her. After a short while, Brandy decided to go back into the trailer to see if DJ was still alive. She grabbed his hand, hoping that he was still there, but he wasn't. And that's when Peter, the only other witness, left, and John called 911. Brandy tells investigators that she is willing to recount this story in the court of law. Brandy was clearly terrified of John because she had just witnessed him shoot her husband. She was also horrified that he would try to shoot and kill her if she told authorities what truly happened when they first arrived on the scene. Key to this account, which contradicts John's story, is first, this is not a suicide attempt. And second, there was more than one witness to this crime. And those witnesses' statements could be vital to this investigation. But did the detectives go and get those witness statements? No, they didn't.
Interestingly, the trajectory of the bullet wound sustained by DJ actually lines up with Brandy's story and Brandy's account of what happened. The bullet entered the front left of the victim's head before leaving out of the rear right. The trajectory, interestingly, was in a downward direction. This in itself is a trajectory that lines up with somebody who was left-handed, somebody that would shoot themselves. However, DJ was right-handed. For DJ to shoot himself in this manner, he would have to contort his hand and the firearm in a way that would be really awkward, which in my view is highly improbable. I don't believe that he would have done that. Unfortunately, vital information was not passed to the medical examiners who conducted the autopsy, such vital information like DJ being right-handed, nor was any of the information relayed from Brandy or DJ's mum, which could have indicated foul play. As a result, DJ's death was continued to be treated as a suicide. The autopsy that was conducted on DJ was actually a limited autopsy, and this was due to the fact that the medical examiner had been informed that DJ had died due to suicide and was a suicide victim. So there was no need to do a full autopsy because they weren't really looking for any evidence of anything else. They already knew what had happened. They were just doing a limited autopsy. The pathologist was looking for signs that DJ had committed suicide, and that is what the pathologist found. It was not treated as a murder or a homicide, which meant that vital other tests and examinations were not conducted during this autopsy. The autopsy only lasted about 30 to 40 minutes, which for an autopsy is quite short. According to some sources, full autopsies usually take between 2 and 4 hours to conduct. So as you can tell, this limited autopsy was very limited. Now, the family of DJ would not know the results of this autopsy for another 3 to 4 months, which was that DJ's official cause of death was suicide. Let's talk more in detail about what happened in the weeks that followed DJ's murder and the aftermath. Notably, Amanda and DJ's family were unable to contact the coroner to try and locate DJ's body. They were unable to get any information out of anybody where their brother was, where their son was. They couldn't find out any information. It was really difficult for them. They actually didn't even make any contact with the coroner. The voicemail box was full, or they wouldn't pick up, they wouldn't answer the emails or anything like that. On the 5th of October, 2 days after DJ was murdered, DJ's family was informed by the coroner that DJ's body had been released to a funeral home. And for those of you who are not aware, for the coroner to release a body to a funeral home, permission has to be granted by the family. However, in this case, no such permission was granted by DJ's family. Nobody said, yes, you can do that to the coroner. Amanda was the spokesperson for the family, and she definitely did not give her permission for this body to be released. More importantly, the body was released to the wrong funeral home. DJ's body was transported to the wrong funeral home, which meant that amongst all this tragedy and this grief, DJ's family had to make further arrangements to have the body transported from the wrong funeral home to the right funeral home. Now, the family really wanted to have an open casket funeral so that they could say goodbye. After all, DJ had been taken from them so suddenly. However, they were informed by the funeral home that they were not able to do so, even with DJ's head covered by a cloth, and their reasoning, I quote, DJ had an autopsy and they usually cut them up and butcher them pretty bad. I'm going to let that sink in right now, that somebody decided that that was the perfect thing to say to this family, to this grieving family. How, I just can't comprehend how someone could say that to somebody's family like that. On the 8th of October, the family went to the funeral home to see DJ and to have and make some final arrangements. Horrifically, the funeral home decided that they would present DJ in the casket open in a body bag with a thin cloth placed over the top and with DJ's arm hanging out, but just from the right elbow down so that the family could see his arm. DJ's mum fainted at the sight of seeing her son like this. The funeral home then decided to give the family a plastic see-through Ziploc bag containing his possessions, containing DJ's final possessions, which included a small deodorant can that was still wet with DJ's blood. The family, despite all this, continue to try and make arrangements for DJ and DJ's cremation. However, they were informed that they were unable to cremate DJ due to the fact that the detectives have not yet released DJ's body for cremation. That was because the investigation was still open and they would be unable to release the body until the investigation had been closed. However, just a few days later, DJ's body was released for cremation. The service took place on the 12th of October 2016, with so many people showing up to give their love and support and to pay their respects to DJ and DJ's family. Now, the next day, on the 13th, Amanda realized that they had released DJ's body, but the case was still open. And she was asking herself, why have they released the body if the case is still open and they're still investigating? And she wanted to know why this had happened, despite the fact the investigation wasn't finished yet and wasn't over. However, she was completely unable to make any contact with any officials. The pure frustration DJ's family must have felt during this tragic period of grief must have been absolutely unbearable.
Finally, on the 16th of October, the family got some news. The investigating officers had decided to make John take a polygraph test, and they also wanted Brandy to take one and said that they would be in touch for a date and time for Brandy soon. However, they never got back to the family with this. A few days later, Amanda caught wind of a rumor going around that John had left to go buy bleach right before calling 911. Amanda, of course, asked detectives to follow this up and check into any CCTV footage that they could find from any local stores. It is unknown whether or not law enforcement followed up on this lead. The family was still not being given any information or updates about this case. Law enforcement said they couldn't tell them anything because it was an ongoing investigation and they needed to wait until the investigation was over with before they could share any information. In April of 2017, the family was invited to the police station to discuss the case. The family was told that this case was being taken from an open case to a pending case, which basically closes the case unless anyone comes forward with any new information. For example, a confession. This meant, though, that the family now had access to case files, and when Amanda looked at the case files, she knew that this case had been mishandled. Notably, the case files show that another eyewitness came forward. A man who would turn out to be Peter, who we discussed earlier in Brandy's statement. And Peter came forward and gave police an account of the shooting, which turned out to be the same as Brandy's. John had maintained that there was no one else in the trailer aside from Brandy, DJ, and himself, but this clearly was not the case. Peter told investigators that he was scared to come forward because he knew what John was capable of, and he was scared that John would try to kill him. As it turns out, Peter had regretfully aided John in covering up the murder as a suicide. The family also found out that the police were aware that DJ was texting his mother the day that he was murdered. And notably, he was actually using John's cell phone because neither Brandy nor DJ had a cell phone at this point. The police failed to take John's cell phone into evidence. The gun used to kill DJ Fickey was taken into evidence, but notably never tested for fingerprints. They still have it in evidence, and it could still be tested to this day. The family went on to learn that John failed his polygraph test, specifically when asked if he shot DJ. But of course, as it was a polygraph test, it would not stand up in court. The polygraph report shows that he was asked the same question multiple times, and each time deception was indicated. The case files also show that a trash can at the crime scene was found with bloody towels in it, but no towels were ever taken into evidence. The family immediately decided to hire a private investigator named Eric Eccles.
My name is Eric Eccles, and I'm a private investigator. I was hired by Amanda Shirley and her family to look into the death of their brother DJ. DJ's death was ruled a suicide, and in fact, it was actually a homicide. Based on the factual evidence that was obtained through witness interviews, police reports, the polygraph examination, all of these things clearly identify and show that DJ's death was a homicide. Some of the evidence that was identified, there was an eyewitness who stated that the person of interest actually went and got the gun and held it to DJ's head. There was evidence where, or the 911 tape, where the 911 operator gave specific instructions for the person of interest to tamper with the crime scene. There was no gun residue test done on DJ's hand. There's just countless number of mistakes. The coroner did not have all the information needed to solidify or to do her investigation as far as the autopsy was concerned and to rule it a homicide. So again, there was a lot of different things that happened and occurred that led to a misjustice being done and ruling this a suicide. My job was actually to get this information, get all the evidence that I could, and try to get them to overturn this suicide to a homicide so justice can be done and the person of interest can be arrested. Again, my name is Eric Eccles, and I'm a private investigator.
Eric, upon reviewing all these files, decided to make an appointment with the medical examiner so that he could show her just how much information was withheld from her. Upon this review, the medical examiner ordered a toxicology report. If the medical examiner was able to obtain a little bit more information to show that DJ's death was actually caused by a homicide, then the medical examiner could change the cause of death and the case could be reopened. It was at this point that Amanda decided to go interview Peter, who had been incarcerated for unrelated reasons.
I know this is kind of awkward and everything.
Yeah.
But we need some closure. You know?
I understand.
And sorry, I said I wasn't gonna do this.
No, that's okay.
It wasn't right what happened to my brother.
Yeah, I know.
DJ was a good man. And he was loved so much. And you don't know how hard it is hearing his babies ask for their daddy every day. And I just want to ask you some details. I mean, we know what happened. I have the investigation report and everything. There's some little details that I wanted to ask you and see if you would cooperate with me. Because this is not going to be over until somebody's in jail. Was finger on the trigger when the gun went off?
Yes.
It was. Did DJ ever touch the gun? And be honest with me, please.
Yes, he had his hand up on it. His left hand.
Was he trying to knock it out of hand?
I don't know if
was he trying to block it?
It was so instantaneous when it went off compared to when I come through the door. I mean, it was like as soon as I come through is when the gun went off. But I couldn't see why he would be trying to make him put it up there, you know what I mean?
Right. Because from what we've been told, DJ threw his arm up like he was trying to block the gun. Maybe trying to, like, push it out of his
DJ
face or
actually,
something.
he had his hand around the end of the barrel.
It's like I told my mama. She told me not to listen to this stuff, not to read it, not to look at it. But like I told her, you know, in order for me to do anything, I've got to know everything.
Right.
And I'm stubborn and hard-headed, and I'm not going to
You
stop.
didn't look at none of the pictures, did you?
No, I've not looked at any. I've looked at all the pictures except any that had DJ involved in them. I didn't want to see those. I don't want to see
Don't
those.
ever look. Yeah, don't ever do that, because, I mean, that's an image you can't get rid of.
Well, Brandy told us details of what he looked like when it happened, and every time I look at a picture of DJ, that was all I seen was half his face, you know, gone. And that's the image I'll never get out of my head.
Yeah, it messes with you. Don't ever look at those pictures.
I won't. But I got his tattoo. Got his picture tattooed on me. You can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's DJ. The big flat bill hat.
Yep. But we miss him so much, Scott. You have no idea. I've forgotten his laugh. I mean, it's almost been a year, but it feels like it just happened last week. And it seems like it's been forever since I've seen him. And I miss him so much.
I understand.
And, I mean, you just need to understand, you know, if this was your sister, you know, I mean, you would want
I'd be doing the
whoever
same
did
thing.
this. Yeah, and I'm not going to stop until is in jail. I mean, he may not admit to shoot DJ, but he lied and tried to cover it up. And I've got a death certificate that says he killed himself. And so when them babies grow up and get older, they're going to think that we're lying to them as if their daddy killed himself. And that's not right. Because DJ didn't kill himself.
No.
And he never would have. He played that part, you know, he played that card all the time. Oh, I'll just kill myself. But it was a card. It was DJ's crutch to try to get his way, you know, to try to get what he wanted. But DJ would have never killed himself because he knew what it was like to grow up without a daddy.
6 to 8 weeks after the toxicology report was requested, the family got the results. They had anticipated that drugs would likely be found in his system, and that's exactly what they found. A stimulant was found in his blood. This next part blows my mind. The medical examiner said that he should have been alert enough because of the stimulant that he could defend himself. And according to the medical examiner, because he didn't defend himself, that's consistent with someone wanting to die. The family argued that DJ did try to defend himself by reaching up and grabbing the gun in an attempt to protect himself. DJ had very little time to react. The medical examiner, despite this, maintained the official ruling that DJ had committed suicide. Further to this, the witness statements from both Brandy and Peter were ruled as unreliable because they were both on drugs at the time. DJ's case ruled as a suicide went cold and investigations were ceased. Personally, we don't believe at all that DJ's death was a suicide. After having unrestricted access to all these case files, we believe that DJ's death was a homicide, and John is the person responsible. And John, the murderer, walks the streets of Georgia freely to this day. You may be asking yourself, what can I do to help find justice for DJ and his family? The process of trying to get DJ's case re-examined is extremely expensive, and the fight for his justice needs your help. In the description below, you can find the links to donate via GoFundMe or the Justice for DJ campaign PayPal. Further to this, there's a petition on change.org that will also be linked down below, and I strongly encourage all of you to go check that out, sign it, and share it with your friends and family. I believe that we are able to help DJ's family and make a difference, aiding them in finding justice. Thank you so much to Amanda Shirley, DJ's sister, for helping us put together this two-part series investigating DJ's murder. You can also find a link to the Justice for DJ campaign in the description below. Alright you guys, so that was it for this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. Also, make sure to subscribe over on Josh's channel. He did an amazing job, and I'm so blessed to have been able to work with him and Amanda on this case. I love you guys so much, and hopefully I will see you guys later.